Okay, so there's still a lot we don't know, but this has the potential to be a turning point in Russia's war. Lieutenant General Andrew Leslie served as the deputy commander for the NATO mission to Afghanistan. He was also a Liberal MP, and he's now a senior associate at the Blue Sky Strategy Group. And here in studio, Roland Paris previously served as foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, now the director of the University of Ottawa's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. Thank you to you both. Mr. Paris, I'd like to start with you. I mean, there's a lot we don't know. What's your initial reaction to what we've heard about this incident in Poland?
Yeah, it's very worrisome. As you say, there's a lot we don't know, so we're still in the fog of war stage here, and it'll be important over the coming hours to determine what this projectile was, where it was coming from. I would say that, and this is pure speculation, but the fact that this apparent strike took place at the very same time that Russia had launched a volley of missile strikes right across Ukraine, the fact that it was right in a border area between Poland and Ukraine, and that it hit a farm, all points to some kind of mistake. But what I'm happy to see is that all the parties here are taking their time to gather the information, and we'll see what turns up by the time we wake up tomorrow morning.
Andrew Leslie, we've seen a lot of the NATO members be very cautious in this to various degrees of alarm, but there's a lot of talk about invoking Article 4. Latvia has talked about this. Poland has talked about this. Give us a sense of how NATO, you think, is responding to this right now.
Well, I think that they're gathering facts. It appears that though it's difficult to disassociate yourself from the passion of what's happened, especially for the people on the ground who are living through the fight, I echo Roland's comments. This is a time for ice water in the veins. Keep calm, keep cool, collect the facts, and let's not underestimate the Russian army's capability to do silly and stupid things which they didn't mean to. People who know a bit about NATO understand that Article 5, right? The attack against one is an attack against all. But Andrew Leslie, walk us through Article 4. What force does that have under the NATO treaty? Article 4 essentially is a discussion point or a call to convene discussions over an incident of seriousness or potential seriousness. It is not in and of itself an escalatory process in getting ready for war, but it is essentially a demonstration of grave concern. Of note, the only time that Article 5 has been implemented was after the Twin Towers went down in the United States. And at that point, it was relatively clear that there was a very serious threat indeed, and they went right to Article 5. Article 4, once again, is discussions.
Okay, so Roland Paris, based on the fact that NATO is going to get together to have discussions potentially, I mean, this seems to be potentially where it's going to go. We are seeing the Russian Defense Ministry denying this, saying it's a deliberate provocation in order to escalate the situation, to even suggest that Russia may have accidentally fired missiles into Poland. What do you make of that response?
Well, they might have responded before they collected their own information, so it'll be interesting to see over the coming hours how Vladimir Putin deals with this situation. I do think, though, that this attack, if it turns out to have not been a deliberate attack, will nevertheless have the effect of reinforcing Allied solidarity. It reminds us of the vulnerability of those bordering states. But it also reminds us, I think, of the dangers of any war potentially spinning out of control. And and others have warned about the risks of this. So the fact that the response so far has been calm and cool and people are taking the time to gather information is reassuring.
Andrew Leslie, I wonder, though, what your response is to what we've heard from Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, saying this is an attack on the collective security of members of Europe. I mean, he has certainly been trying to pull NATO into a bigger role as possible in the defense of his country. You called for ice water in veins. How do you think President Zelensky has responded to this so far?
I think he's one of the most magnificent wartime leaders that has been produced probably in this century. I think that he's literally fighting for the lives of his people, and he will use every opportunity to broaden the scope of the combat power available to him so he can get rid of the Russians faster than he's currently doing, which is next to impossible. So I fully understand the passion with which he approaches this issue. I understand his belief, but like us, he doesn't know the facts. And for the rest of the world watching this closely, the whole idea of spiraling out of control is one that you have to watch like a hawk. because therein lies existential disaster for all of us. So calm, cool, collected, gather the facts. And if it does turn out that these are Russian missiles, it's tactically, operationally, and strategically illogical to launch one or two missiles that land in open fields as a precursor for a planned offensive action against a NATO state.
Right.
So if it happened, it was almost certainly a mistake.
Right, that was going to be my question. You think it's obviously incompetence or a mistake or an accident. Roland Paris, has been some suggestion from the Russian side that perhaps Ukrainian air defense hit their missiles and caused debris to go across the border into Poland. Now, Russia still fired the missile in the first place. I don't know if that makes a difference. But your thoughts on what President Zelensky has had to say? Well,
he's a master communicator, and he's using this opportunity to point out that to highlight the fact that Ukraine and NATO countries share a common concern about Russian aggression, and as he should, frankly, in the position where he is. But we don't know. We don't know whether it seems like it would be an errant Russian missile, but it's also possible that it was something else. And, you know, it will be important to find out. If it turns out that the Russians continue to deny this and it looks like it was a mistake that they're just denying, I would imagine that after consultation that there may be additional reinforcement of bordering countries, maybe if they can spare them, additional air defense. I think that this will have the effect of bringing NATO countries closer together.
Andrew Leslie, what's your sense of how NATO should respond? I mean, it seems inconceivable, and not to make light of the tragedy of the two deaths of two people in Poland, but after MH17 was shot down with 220, I believe, NATO citizens on board that airplane, Article 5 wasn't invoked. It seems unlikely it would be invoked in this situation, but how do you think NATO might respond to this? And has Russia perhaps made a mistake that could lead to an escalation of support for Ukraine?
Well, first and foremost, let's not forget that Russia, especially since February of this year, has shown themselves to be serial liars under each and every subject you could possibly imagine. So take that as a granted that they're lying, no matter what they say. NATO's response, I think, will essentially be a surge of anti-aircraft, longer range, higher altitude reaching anti-aircraft, not all of which will end up being in Ukraine now. Some will probably end up along the Polish border, one side or t'other. And you'll probably see more air defense command and control architectures and ability to detect incoming missiles or cruise missiles, which will negate any purpose or any advantage to Russia having done so with these two strikes in a deliberate fashion. So it's almost certainly pointing towards a mistake by a clumsy, inept force, which, and this is quite scary, has under their command and control the world's largest single arsenal of nuclear weapons. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind.
Yes, I don't think that's moving out of anyone's mind after the last few months. It was a good point to reinforce it right now. Roland Paris, your quick thoughts.
Well, let's not forget that Russia has been borrowing missiles from the likes of Iran and reportedly North Korea. Right. So you have potentially some pretty unreliable equipment too. But what I think we need to keep sight of is that this happened on a day when there was the biggest attack that Russia has conducted so far on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. So the horror of that Russian response to civilian areas, it's a desperation move, they are losing, and by all indications, the momentum is still on the Ukrainian side. It's really horrific what they're doing, and this seems to have been an accidental byproduct of a deliberate attack on civilian areas in Ukraine.
Okay, Roland Paris, Andrew Leslie, thanks so much for joining us in a confusing time right now and bringing some clarity to it. We'll have you back when we know some more. All right, thanks so much, gentlemen.